Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my newest 5-star book, and that would be Demon Copperhead. This is just an absolutely fantastic novel that I read here recently, and it is definitely a book that is somewhat outside of my wheelhouse. I have read plenty of literary fiction throughout my life, but primarily I am a science fiction, fantasy, horror kind of reader at this point. But this is a book that has been calling to me for a long time. I've had people recommend it to me, and this is one of those books that has so much praise around it. I think it won a Pulitzer Prize. It has like a 4.5 on Goodreads with like a crazy amount of ratings, all of those things. But this is just one of those books that I thought I would like. And thankfully I was right, but pushed off for a really long time. And I am so glad that I finally got around to reading it. Now, very quickly, what this book is about. This is a book that really deals with a whole lot of social issues. And I know when people hear that, they might think, or they might turn off from it right away. They don't want to deal with the realities of life. And I totally get that. But I do think sometimes it is important to sit down and experience some of those things that people absolutely go through. So this book really follows the life of somebody who is born into poverty in rural Virginia in Appalachia, whichever way you want to say it, and just the struggles of life that go on in that area. And this is a book that definitely spoke pretty deeply to me. I went to college in a very poor county in the state I went to. I saw all kinds of things that it's sometimes hard to believe that it's real places where people lived. And it's just one of those things. I'm from like a somewhat rural area. And so, I think the town that my parents grew up in have like 1,000 people who live there. So like just some of these like little things definitely, have a deep impact on me and just things that I have seen and experienced in life. Some of this kind of highlighted it in a way. I think this is one of those books where if I had read it when I was younger, I wouldn't have had the same impact it has on me now. Somebody who is really able to absorb the impact of what is going on in these areas. So this is a story that, like I said, tackles poverty, tackles social services and the lack of care for people. And then definitely something that is heavily talked about in this book is the opioid epidemic and addiction as a whole, and just like how it's not always somebody's fault, and how there have been very purposeful and damning things that have been done to people, and people who have just been taken advantage of by corporations to line their own pockets. And there are like active lawsuits going on about this to this day, and more comes out of it every year. There's a lot of good books and movies and stuff if you're don't know a whole lot about this topic. And honestly, I hope that you don't. I hope that this isn't something that has affected your life, your family, people you know and love, because it is a true tragedy. And this is a book that I think highlights a lot of those things. And that being said, I do want to compare this book to a few different things. Obviously, the name Demon Copperhead comes, in the same vein of David Copperfield, and there are definitely some similarities. There are definitely some characters. When I finish the book, I look back and I can line up the historic characters from David Copperfield to the characters in Demon Copperhead, which is, as somebody who really liked David Copperfield when I read it all those years ago, it was kind of interesting to go back and look at the story. And I think it was an interesting way to portray the story, but it still never made this story not feel real. This is still a story that feels so real and visceral that it is, man, it is sometimes a very hard thing to read. I'd also like to compare it to The Jungle by Upton St. Clair, which I know a lot of people don't know too much about. I feel like it's one of those books that you maybe read a section of it in school, or you hear that it is the story that changed the way like the health and safety happened around food. But really what The Jungle is about is it's the story of immigration and how hard and difficult it was, and how once again people were taken advantage of by crooked people, companies, corporations, all kinds of things, again, which is a tale as old as time, but it really shows the struggle of the immigrant coming to America in that time period. And then the other one is To Kill a Mockingbird, which is obviously a very, very famous book, very well known, but it obviously deals with racial inequality in the South. And this is like the third book I would put into like a trilogy of important, powerful books. And this one, like I said, dealing mostly with poverty and child miscare and the opioid epidemic, which obviously none of those are really glamorous or fun things to talk about, but they are absolutely important things to look at and consider. And I just have a feeling that this is going to be one of those books that maybe has the staying power that I think it should have. So I've talked a lot about the book without talking about the book. So some things I do want to talk about that I just made this one a very powerful read, but something that I really enjoyed. And enjoyment, like I said, is going to be a really weird word to use for this book because it covers such difficult material and everything. But I do just want to say that the character work throughout this book is absolutely fantastic. It's a story that just works for me in general because we're following somebody from the time they were very, very young to a little bit later in life. I don't want to say the exact time period, but early life to early adulthood is probably the best way to say it. And I really think getting to experience life with somebody who is so different from my own is one of those very powerful things. And not only is it our main character Damon, we get so much from him. That is our main point of view that we get everything from. But there are plenty of side and supporting characters that come and go in and out of the story in just a very masterful way. You get characters who come in, play a big role, and then are gone, and you might not see them again at all, or they come in later and play smaller little roles, which to me showed the brilliance of the story, but also just like replicated life. Like, you have friends that you were friends from the time you were 5 to 12, and then went to different schools, you lost touch, things didn't keep up. And this story really encapsulates that idea very well, while still bringing in the new people who still end up having an impact in your life. And just this whole just rolling decks of Rolodex, there we go, that's the word I was looking for, this Rolodex of characters who come and go, and it just each one feels unique and different while still fitting into the story in a really powerful way. I do think that the plot of this story is one that you can very easily empathize with and feel sorry for the main character, but also just like it's told in a way that flows very well. It's almost told in a retrospective way where you're learning what is happening, what is going on, and you're kind of unveiling the story of this person's life as you move through it with them. And I think it's just one of those things that works really well as a whole. And it's just a storytelling method that for me works really, really well and is something that, once again, I'm personally drawn to oftentimes. It gives you the ability to experience the story in the moment, but also have the main character's retrospective thoughts and feelings on the thing as they've matured and grown up, that I think really just paints a beautiful picture, a beautifully painful picture, but one that is worth reading nonetheless. And then once again, I got to go back to the themes here. This is a story of themes, and I think the themes are the things that are the most important here. The character work, great, it is amazing, and it is something that really pulls you into the story. But this is really a story that is tackling these really difficult issues, and I think doing it very well, and in a way that for so many people who haven't experienced them, haven't seen things, I have a feeling that people might read this book and think that this is just too much. It's over the top. And that's actually something I'm going to get into when I talk a little bit about my negatives. But I do think it's easy for people to look at this and be like, this is so unrealistic. There's no way this happens. And it's like, no, this stuff really does happen. I know people in life who like, this is real. Like, this is not some kind of imaginary story where it's just coming up with the worst case situation. Much worse stuff happens to real people every single day. And I think that just highlighting those themes are just super important and really is like the core of this story, and something that I think ends up making it a tragically beautiful but powerful read. And I've kind of used those words over and over again, but I think it's just true. I think there are different ways to look at books. I think there are ways to look at books where, this isn't like a book you read for enjoyment. This isn't a book you take to the beach to kick back and relax and like enjoy yourself with like a margarita or something. This is the kind of book that's gonna like make you look at the world in a way that you probably don't want to, and maybe you would rather ignore, but it's an important thing to look at. And so this is not a book that I say enjoyment is the right way to say it, but it is powerful, and it is a powerful book that I think is important, and that more, and like if you haven't read it, you probably should. And I think you'll at least learn a new perspective of the world and understand some of the things that are happening. All of that being said, any book, there are definitely some negatives that I can have, and honestly, it's a little bit hard, but I can definitely see why people would bounce off this book. And I'm going to kind of count this as a negative, is because it is just a lot. I mean, there's a lot of bad things, and it feels like the bad things just keep piling up and piling up. And if you're not in kind of the right headspace for that, if you're not somebody who wants to experience that, you do want to just use reading as escapism. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think this is not going to be a book that works for you. It's going to be a book that like twists the knife over and over and over again. And when you think it can't get worse, a second knife comes and stabs you, and it's awful like that. I did see, this is one of those books where I was like, I need to see what people are saying negative about this book. Definitely saw some pushback on the author themselves. I don't know anything about this author other than they wrote this book. I have not researched them at all, but I saw some negative comments about them and them being well off and using this book as like a way to enrich themselves even more off the back of poverty. I don't know anything about that, but I will say it definitely could feel like it revels in it, like it's using all of this bad stuff to like, I don't even know the proper way to say it, but it just revels in it, like almost like it's glad it's happening. And I vehemently disagree with that sentiment, but I can totally see why somebody would have it. And so that is maybe something that is going to be difficult for some readers, and might be something that really makes them not enjoy this book or not want to read it, not finish it. I could definitely see this being a book that's a really easy DNF for a lot of people, because they're just going to get to a point where they're like, I can't take this anymore. And I totally understand that. But I will say that I think the entire story paints just a great picture of like real things that are happening. And so maybe this feels like a little bit of a charged book review, but I just have got to say that Demon Copperhead is one of the best books that I have ever read. It is going to be a book that lives in my head for a long time. It is going to be a book that I'm definitely going to try and push onto a lot of people, because I think one way or another it's going to affect them, and it might not be in the most positive way. Like, I think it's going to make you question things that maybe you haven't questioned. It's going to make you feel things you haven't felt, and might make you just angry at the world. I know there were definitely times when I was reading this that I was just kind of like upset, because I know how real some of this stuff is, which is always very sad. And once again, this is not a happy-go-lucky book. This is definitely a down in the gutters kind of book, but I do think it's one of those things that it works so well. It's a beautifully put together book. All that being said, I would love to hear if you didn't enjoy this book or you didn't like it. Tell me down below in the comments. Is there something I'm missing that I'm just so oblivious to? I just have my rose tinted glasses on and I just can't understand why. I would love to hear arguments for that in the comments. I would love to talk about this in anything about this book in the comments or in the Discord. As always, you can hit me up there. But I think that is going to be all for me today. This, like I said, is a 5-star read for me. Is my favorite book of the year so far, and I really just wanted to kind of give it its own space here on the channel. I talked about it in a weekly update, but I felt like it needed its own kind of dedicated space here. So once again, that's all for me. And remember, read what you want when you want.